Did you guys figure out who he's talking about?
Yep.
Oh man, I've been very blessed, and I have to give the credit to the power, a merciful God. My name's Tarek. I'm an addict.
Hey, Tarek.
Oh my God, a power greater than myself separated me from crack cocaine, alcohol, and a host of other substances on the morning of November 5th in 2007. And because of a merciful God and a loving God and a group of people around me that I love with all my heart, that have always told me the truth, regardless of how it was going to affect my feelings. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm just going to use that program as a blanket. I know I'm in a DAA meeting, but none of us would be sitting in this room without Alcoholics Anonymous. And because of that program and this program and Cocaine Anonymous and the fellowships within those programs, I have found it unnecessary to use cocaine or any other mind-altering substance to treat any degree of psychological pain that I am experiencing. And because of that gift given to me for free and spontaneously, I have found it that I owe a debt. Some people don't believe that. I do. Because if I can embody this idea that there's a debt here that I have to pay back, it affects the way I live my life. Things have changed for me. I used to have a big book. Now I carry a 12 and 12. That should give some of y'all something to laugh about. And I got the timer up here to give you newcomers a little bit of hope. Yeah. I don't know if you're going to get my story tonight. I tell my story a good bit, and honestly, I get tired of telling it. But I'm going to tell parts of it tonight. There are a few things I want to talk about because something hit me like a ton of bricks on the way here. There's a man. This meeting wouldn't be here tonight if it wasn't for a man who recently passed away. His name was Scott Jackson. And the first place Scott and I ever met, Carl, was that Starbucks right down the road from here. And dude, I hadn't driven by that Starbucks. I don't remember the last time I drove by that Starbucks. We sat down at that Starbucks and I started drilling him with all kinds of questions about all these guys on these speaker CDs and his connection to them and blah, blah, blah. And that, we all get taken to these turning points in our lives. And I was driving here and I drove by that Starbucks and I realized I wouldn't be here. This meeting would not be here. Spearheads would not be here. The Language of the Heart retreat would not be here if it wasn't for that man. A lot of our lives in this room, ripple effects have been felt in this room because of that man. And then the meeting, when I made the comment earlier that you may not get my story tonight, it's because of the hollow bone. I don't know what's going to happen up here, but I've done enough work spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, that something's going to flow through me tonight. And that's what becoming a hollow bone is about. Somehow we end up with this idea that the St. Francis prayer becomes a lived experience. In the 12 and 12, in step 11, Bill dissects and breaks down the St. Francis prayer. And for years, guys, so when I first showed up here and started doing a step 11, I can't remember if it was Dante gave it to me or I was at a conference and they handed out these bookmarks and mine was laminated. And on one side of it, it had the in the morning instructions, when we retire in the evening. It had a couple of prayers on one side, maybe the steps. And I remember St. Francis prayer was on this bookmark. So it was a big bookmark. And I always thought that I came in here, I did the work, and all these great things like peace and forgiveness and surrender and comfort were going to flow into me. And then they would flow into you from me, right? But now, over the last couple of years, I've realized that these things are already in me. And we do the spiritual work to become the hollow bone so these things flow out of us. They're already here. We were born with them. And so I'm driving and I'm thinking about Scott. I'm thinking of the name of this meeting. You know, I'm gonna tell a story. So there's this guy named Nari that a few of us in this room know, right? And I used to go to this other clubhouse up in Alpharetta. And at the end of the meeting, when they would do the Lord's Prayer, this guy, Nari, would get up and walk out of the meeting, and he would go stand outside. It was when it was in the shopping mall, is what I'm talking about. It moved a couple of times. And you walk out of the meeting, and there's a bunch of us. We used to all go to the Thursday night young people's meeting, and we would walk out of there, and Nari would be there, and he'd be handing out these CDs, right? I know they don't exist anymore, but we used to listen to these things called CDs. You'd put them in your car stereo. And so he gave us these CDs, and it was 2 talks, right? But the first night I got the CD, I had about 8 or 9 months sober. And I had been working with Dante, and I made a bunch of amends. I was sponsoring people, but all I was doing really when I went to these meetings was chasing women. That's all I was doing. That was my primary objective. My primary purpose was that. Now, look, I sponsored a lot of men, but that was not my primary purpose, I don't think. I wanted to stay sober, and I was excited about sobriety, but I had some ulterior motives. I'm going to sit up here, and I'm just going to claim it for what it is. And I was struggling at this point. And I would continue to struggle. So he hands me the CDs. I put them in my car door. That was 8, 9 months. You fast forward a year, 9 months later. So I'm a year and a half sober. Okay. At this point, I've started sleeping with prostitutes. Okay. Off of Craigslist. It doesn't bother me to talk about it from the podium. This is part of my experience. Because I know there are other guys, maybe some guys sitting in this room, that are struggling with that. So I have experience with that, and it's valuable experience. You know, we think that the past is our most valuable asset only when we arrive here. It's always our most valuable asset because that's what it builds identification with other people. And it's always going to be a foundational piece of identification, our struggles and how we overcome them with the use of the 12 steps in our relationship with God. And so I'm struggling. I'm living the bedevilments on page 52, and I'm driving home. I want to say I was driving home from the same meeting on a Thursday night, and I threw this CD in, and the name of the CD was The Hollow Bone. And it was a guy named Mark Houston who passed away in 2010. And the whole meeting was about becoming a hollow bone and what 10 and 11 are really about. And then I heard a man with this one-eyed guy. He's got a patch over one eye. He's from Texas. His name is Chris R. And he had this other talk he gave about the spiritual malady, which is conscious separation. I'm so fixated on the things going on in my mind that all I can think about is myself and the circumstances in my life. And therefore, I can't be a servant, not in any meaningful way. So that doesn't show up in my life because I'm consumed with self. Right? And that's what I was experiencing was the spiritual malady, conscious separation from you. You know, I could talk about God. Was I in this remembrance of God? Was God on my mind a lot? Did I want to pay off a debt at that point? I don't think any of that stuff was going on for me back then. And so I started, God, this is so cool. I don't get to tell these stories very often. So you fast forward, I start devouring this guy's speaker CDs. And I'm sitting at Longhorn one night because a big thing in sponsorship family back then was your home group, guys. Home group is not a meeting. They're not the same thing. I don't know if anybody's told you that. You measure a meeting based on what happens between, in this case, what do you guys do at the end of this? Serenity prayer? Right. So this meeting, if it's a meeting, is measured between, its effectiveness is measured between that set-aside prayer and the serenity prayer that you say at the end of the meeting. If this is a true, solid home group, it's measured by what happens between the serenity prayer at the end of the meeting and the next set-aside prayer. What you do as a group outside of this hour. That's what makes a home group. You know, there's a lot of meetings out there, but you got to ask yourself, do you have a home group? Right? Do you care about that group? What happens at that group and the message it's carrying and taking care of the newcomers and standing by that door when they show up. And so Mike and I, Mikey right here, my oldest friend in recovery, he he and I are sitting at a Longhorn Steakhouse. Everybody's gone. We used to go. Our home group, back to that, home group started a couple of hours before the meeting started. You had to come, you set up, you hung out, you get to know people. And then we had our meeting, and then we went to dinner afterwards. So Friday night with Dante, who was my sponsor at that time, was a 5 to 6 hour event. And this one Friday night, Mike and I think, are the last two at Longhorn. And we're sitting there, and I think I'm telling Mike about this guy named Mark H. on these CDs, and he's got this smile on his face. And he's like, this guy's my grand sponsor. I'm like, what are you talking about? And that's when Carl and Mikey had met Scott. And I remember Scott had come to our home group, and he led a topic on the sex inventory in the Big Book, which was a very interesting topic for people that have all kinds of craziness going on in their sex lives, and they don't want to talk about it. So I remember he ruffled some feathers that night. And Mike made the introduction, and Scott became my sponsor. Me and Mikey went through the Big Book Awakening together at that point. And Scott was my guy for right at 8 years. And I've had another sponsor for the last 8 years, and Dante was my sponsor for the first 2 years. And so those men they carried the message to me. But what all three of those men did, like if there's a spiritual river out there, and we're trying to, we're way showers here. All we do is we're trying to show people the way to the river. Right? Take me to the river. It's a good Talking Heads song, or Al Green song that Talking Heads did. So take me to the river. If there is that spiritual river, right? These men have always, in the beginning, they brought me handfuls of water for me to drink. But they all pointed me to the river. Go to the river. They showed me that the Big Book was a treasure map. And there's a treasure waiting for all of us. And there are different paths in that map. Don't get rigid like I did for all those years, and you get tied to this methodology and technique. And man, we're talking about spirituality, not math equations. Right? And so I've been very blessed over my time here. I've had brothers on this path. 2 of them are sitting up here on this front row that have sponsored me at times and have been more important to me. Man, I can't tell you. They've been just as important as my sponsors have been. They really have, And because when I got here, I thought I needed a reason for my alcoholism and my drug addiction, right? Was it because I was sexually abused, right? Between ages 5 and 7? That's why I became a crackhead. That's why I became an alcoholic, right? It was a family member. I grew up in an alcoholic home. Maybe that makes me an alcoholic and a drug addict. I remember making the connections, when I heard the flesh hitting flesh in the middle of the night, the doors slamming, the furniture breaking, the mom screaming, the mom pulling her hair, dad coming home, he walks in the front door looking a certain way and has a certain energy about him, closes the door, drinks for a couple hours, comes back out, and that's a totally different household at that point. Scary place. Right, mom pulls her hair, slaps herself in the face, doesn't know how she's going to deal with this man, and she leaves. She tells these 2 boys she can't take it anymore. She's leaving, and sometimes she's gone just for 4, 5, 6 hours. Other times she's gone for a few days. But these 2 boys believe that mom has just abandoned them, and so these 2 boys would drag these chairs out of the dining room and dining room table, put them up. We were apartment kids. We were the first apartment when you pulled into the apartment complex, and it had the dining room window. We pulled these 2 chairs, me and my little brother, get up on these chairs, and we're staring out the window, and we're looking at every set of headlights, wondering if that's our mom coming home. So what does a kid who at this point is probably 6, 7, 8 years, all those years this happened, what does that kid say to himself? He says, something's wrong with me. Mom keeps leaving. Why am I not good enough? Why am I not important? He makes a connection that when dad drinks that stuff, bad shit happens, right? Excuse my language. Bad stuff happens. He makes a commitment to himself that he's not going to drink. But this kid's also uneasy. He's easily annoyed the majority of the time with circumstances and people in his lives. He's over dependent on people, and he's incessantly demanding on other people or those same people. And he's not satisfied. Sounds like being restless, irritable, and discontent, doesn't it? So this kid who's told everyone around him that he's not going to grow up and be like his old man. He's not going to drink. What does he do when he's about 14 or 15 years old? And that spring in his chest, the proverbial spring in the chest, starts to tighten, right? And the world's not a friendly place. It's pretty hostile, right? At least it was for me. The world is a hostile place. People's eyes are not very welcoming. His name is Tarek, and he looks like he's Irish, and he's from the Middle East, and nobody buys that, right? So I was born in Damascus, Syria. We immigrated here when I was 3 years old in 1980, give or take. Yeah, 80. We went to Detroit, Michigan. We came to Atlanta in 81. These two little boys are getting westernized really quick because mom's got to work to support the family and dad's a drunk. Okay? And mom decides at some point, because grandma is pressuring her, grandma's a devout Muslim, one of the most spiritual people I've ever met in my entire life. Don't know if I'll get to that part of the story. And mom wants the boys to go to the mosque. So we go to the mosque and we get ostracized. You know, look at me. Pale skin, red hair. I don't look like the kids at the mosque. I get ostracized. But I'm also in school. And I'm becoming, I get into sports. I want to be involved with my friends. So I go to Christian Bible study, Young Life. I get ostracized there. My own people don't want me. The people I'm choosing don't want me because I'm just something different about me. And so with a lot of AA speakers, that's a common theme. I didn't fit in. But I don't know if it's true for every single person that says it to the degree that it was true for me. All right. And probably is, actually. And so I was at this pool party. And the way I'm going to describe it is those eyes that are not welcoming when you're younger and you don't have medicine to treat your internal condition. Like you need something to make the world a more friendly place. And so I'm looking at all those eyes. I'll never forget it. I'm sitting at the shallow end of the pool. There's a friend that's there with me. And, I don't know, we can't do this today in 2025, but back in 1991, 1990, there are certain parents that let all the kids drink at their house, all right? They took all the car keys from the people who could drive because they'd rather you get messed up at their house and not drive around than get messed up and drive around. I don't know if you can get away with that in 2025, but you sure as hell got away with it in 1990 and 91. And I'm at one of those pool parties. And I'm at this pool party, and there's girls there, and I'm terrified of girls. I'm awkward. I can't talk to them. I'm super athletic, so all the guys respect me because I'm really good at sports, baseball, football, basketball, really good at sports. So sort of, I get street cred that way, right? But I ain't got no cred with the women. And I am very awkward and can't make eye contact. And there's a bunch of guys there, some older than me. And they're at the deep end of the pool. This is a big pool, 8 feet, the deep end. And there's about, 8 to 10 feet. And there's a shed where they store all the tools and the lawnmowers and all that stuff. And there are some guys that are climbing up on that shed and running across it and doing cannonballs into the deep end of the pool. And all the girls are oohing and ahhing. And I'm like, I want to be like that, right? I want to be like that. Where do I get that courage from? Why do I look around this pool party and everybody's eyes are telling me, stay over there. We got enough friends. We don't need any more friends. Right? Isn't that what we do? We just create these stories out of thin air and we buy them and we believe them and they become reality. How do we change that reality? Well, for a 14, 15-year-old who has swore that he wasn't going to end up like his dad, he's left with one choice at that pool party. And he's drinking that choice. And somewhere between the second and the fifth drink, something starts to happen. A sudden and spectacular upheaval begins to happen in this guy. Somewhere between the second and the fifth drink, I start to have a profound alteration in my reaction to that situation. Somewhere between the second and the fifth drink, I begin to have a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from my insecurity in that moment. Somewhere between the second and the fifth drink, I have been transformed. Somewhere between the second and the fifth drink, alcohol did for me what I could not do for myself. I was able to get up on that shed and run across that roof and jump into the deep end of that pool and get out of the pool. And not only had I been transformed, all of you had been transformed. All those unfriendly eyes were the most welcoming eyes now. They're like, man, we want you to be in our lives. We need you to be our friend. So everything in here and in here had changed. That's powerful. That's what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has to offer us as well. That type of transformation. And, as you get older and you go to these therapists and you counselors, once the hard drugs start and you're trying to figure out what's going on and everybody's telling you, Tarek, if you just wouldn't smoke that stuff and shoot that stuff and drink that stuff and eat those pills, you wouldn't have any problems. And you're sitting across from them, it just doesn't register, right? What they're calling the problem, we call the solution. It does not make any sense to us. And so we struggle with it. We struggle until the miracle of separation shows up. Right? And so as I got through school, I became a standout high school basketball player. I was all county. I played AAU. I played basketball my first year in college. And it was my identity, full-on identity. I was a periodic drinker. I bowed to the porcelain god on a regular basis. Right? I see the earmarks of my loss, my inability to control. But I hadn't ventured into the realm that I couldn't come back, like beyond human aid. I hadn't gone into that yet. Then in 1995, my life changed. I met some people that introduced me to the Grateful Dead, to Widespread Panic, and this other band named Fish. And it was not only like a detour, I was off the reservation, right? It was an underground culture that traveled around. And it would be years into recovery, a few years into recovery before I realized what was really going on when I would go to these concerts. And I travel all over the country. I learned along the way that if you sold drugs, you got tickets for free. You got your drugs for free. You got your alcohol for free. You got your hotel rooms paid for, gas to get to the next show, everything. You just could go from one city to the next. And that's what I did between 1995 all the way up until pretty much 2007 when I get sober, off and on. And those 3 hours, maybe 5 hours, were magical. You get to the parking lot, you're looking for that magical combination, the right amount of drugs, alcohol, hallucinogenics, all that stuff. You go in and you have experienced the amount of human connection. You guys have heard this, right? That addiction is like isolation and disconnection, right? It is the ultimate form of separation. All right, consumed with self. I can't connect. I can't look people in the eye. And I can feel people and I feel the love and I'm okay with myself. And the music starts and I have no past. I have no future. I'm entirely present. I swear to you, that sounds like freedom from the bondage of self. That's what it was. That's why I chased it for so long. But just like Bill, who had the boomerang that returned in its flight and all but cut him to ribbons, that's what that did, that lifestyle of selling drugs, traveling around making money, living out of hotel rooms. That way of life was my boomerang. It was a solution for a very long time, and then it cut me to ribbons. And so I graduated from college. I'm trying to squeeze all this really quick so you guys get a story out of me. And because there's other stuff I want to talk about. And so that lifestyle led me to trying to sustain everything through selling drugs. And ultimately, I get arrested. And I have 2 Schedule I felonies that I'm facing. I'm looking at prison time. This was November 4th. And I'm going to get through this part of the story really quick. I'm arrested on the evening of November 4th. God's miracle of separation, the instruments that he used, one of the greatest things that's ever taken place in my life was a bunch of Duval County police officers arresting me. Beautiful experience. Life is lived going forward. It's understood in the rear view. I understand now what God was doing for me. And so I was separated. The first miracle has to happen fast. Otherwise, you got a different speaker. Miracle of separation. It's never slow. It incorporates a surrender for some of us. So I had this experience. I sit up all night. I am at this point in my story, I'm smoking a lot of crack. I'm smoking a bunch of DMT. I'm doing 280s of Oxycontin. I'm drinking an ungodly amount of alcohol. That's what I'm doing at the tail end there. And I'm going into detox. And so what I'm about to describe to you could be a hallucination for all I know. All right. Bill Wilson, man, sitting in that bed. I figured this was probably December 13th or 14th, 1934. Abby has come to visit him. They have talked about these, some people say that, the 6 steps of the Oxford group, the however many C's they had. And they're talking about spiritual activities. Now, that much I'm sure of, what Abby had done with the Oxford group. And Bill is aggro. Bill does not like the idea of a God personal to him. He could get down with spirit of the universe, creative intelligence, a universal power. But when you talk to him about a czar of the heavens, no matter how strong his sway might be, he really did not like that. And he was depressed and he was angry and he was laying in his bed. And he said, if there is a God, show yourself to me. And that was his burning bush experience. The room lit up. He felt a breeze. And he knew he had experienced the God of the preachers. And the next day, him and Silkworth were talking, and Bill explained to Silkworth what had happened. And the humility of Dr. Silkworth, the humility of Dr. Young, and I can't get to that, but these are doctors who told Roland Hazard, who told Bill Wilson, we can't help you. We've tried everything we can on your ass. You are hopeless now. That's what they needed to experience that hopelessness. And Dr. Silkworth said to Bill, Bill, whatever happened to you, hold on to it. Anything's better than the way you were yesterday. Ebby came to see him, and he gave him a book called Variety of Religious Experience by William James. It's referenced in our big book. I doubt Bill Wilson read this book because I tried to read it about 5 years ago. It is the hardest book I've ever read in my entire life. And Bill Wilson sitting in detox with the jitters and he ain't reading that. What we think happened is he gave him one story about an alcoholic who had had a conversion experience, right? A conversion experience. Mine wasn't as strong as Bill's. What happened to me was when the sun was coming up, and I was sitting on the edge of the cot in the morning of November 5th, a realization was injected into my consciousness. And what that realization said was, today is your new sobriety date and it's Jason's birthday. Jason was a dear friend of mine that overdosed and died on my birthday in 2003. So what I experienced in that moment was the universe creating a set of circumstances that gave my sobriety date a meaning, that gave me a gift spontaneously and for free. And that's what I held on to. They released me from that jail 5 weeks later. I had an experience in my arraignment right before that. My mom, I'm the type of addict whose phone gets turned off unless he needs something, who vanishes, who disappears. People that care about you don't know if you're alive or dead. I know I got some of those people in this room. That's the kind of addict I was. My mom showed up to the court. My family didn't want anything to do with me. My brother, my best friend. And so in the courtroom, one of my buddies who sold drugs with me, he got me a lawyer. That lawyer had been a police officer. He had gone to law school and become a district attorney, assistant district attorney, and now he was a defense attorney. So God was already doing for me through mercy. People talk about grace a lot, and I know grace is an important thing, guys. The definition of grace that I like is divine assistance given to a human being for regeneration. Beautiful description, right? We have a lot of grace here. I mean, what happened? What was different between November 4th and November 5th? I could have got high in jail if I wanted to. A guy who couldn't keep a crack pipe out of his mouth, couldn't keep the whiskey bottle out of his mouth, and all of a sudden, there's no desire. That's grace probably, right? But I think it's something else. It's called mercy. The definition of mercy that I work with is the compassionate treatment bestowed on a human being in distress. I was a human being in distress, and God took mercy on me. And that's what happened. I can talk about grace all I want. I think it was more mercy because I didn't deserve it. I had done nothing in my life up to that point to deserve it. The compassionate treatment, the set of circumstances that God created for me. And so I go to this court arraignment. My lawyer approaches and I said, have you spoken to my mother? He goes, yeah, she's out there in the gallery. So as I turned to face my mom, my vision was distorted. Our eyes connected. Everything was blurry. And for the first time in my life, I saw what I did to other people, what my alcoholism, what my drug addiction, what my selfishness, what my self-seeking, what my inconsideration of other people did to other human beings that love me. I destroyed people. If you were in the blast radius, you got destroyed. My mom's eyes were sunk in her head. She was frail. Her skin was hanging off. I mean, she looked like she'd been through the ringer, and her knees buckled in the courtroom. And it became unacceptable for the first time in my life to be able to do that, to have the capacity to hurt someone like that. I was willing to do whatever I had to do to not go there. They released me into a treatment center. And this is, I just said I was willing to do whatever I had to do. And I needed to find this guy, Dante. Dante had tried to carry the message to me. And there was a guy named Randy that had tried to carry the message to me. I'd been to Dante's house for the Big Book study. I knew if you guys, Fred's story, when the two people come to talk to him, the two members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he says, man, the proposals were drastic, right? It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. But the moment I accepted them, I had the curious sensation or feeling that my problem had been solved. I can't tell you why. I knew if I could get hooked back up with Dante, my problem was going to be solved. I cannot explain that to you. Where does that come from? Not me. Not what I was working with at the time. And so I got hooked back up with Dante, and I started working these steps. And I started going to the Big Book study on Monday night. I started showing up early to the home group. I was stayed for the meeting, and I went out to dinner. And that was my home group for 3 years, 5-6 hour home group event. I made a bunch of amends. I started sponsoring guys when I was 4 months sober, and I have not looked back. I mean, a lot of you are sitting in this room, and the impact you guys have had on my life, I don't even have words for that. I don't. You guys are the joy. You brought so much joy into my life. You bring so much joy into my life and purpose. My garbage, as my buddy Brandon says, my garbage begins to have meaning when you allow me to use it. I didn't go through it for nothing. I can finally say, oh, that's why I had that experience, so I could help this guy. All right? And so I was looking. They offered me 3 years in prison. And Dante, I used to really not like it when Dante would tell me there might be somebody in prison I could carry the message to. That was his thing. And so I just put one foot in front of the other. I chopped wood. I carried water. I sponsored guys. I made amends. I got letters written. I passed drug screens. I got back into school. I got a job at the treatment center. And on the morning, September 5th, somewhere around there, 9-10 months later, I get a phone call. I'm in my little studio apartment right down the street from the treatment center. And it's Travis, my attorney's name. He says, Tarek, I don't understand what happened. Somebody upstairs truly loves you. They've dropped all the charges. I'm talking 2 Schedule I felonies, drug trafficking. How does that happen? I had a lot of drug dealers on my 8-step list I had to make amends to. A lot of them wouldn't see me because they all thought I worked for the police. All right. What was I going to do? Show up and tell all these drug dealers that God did for me what I couldn't do for myself? I don't think they'd buy that. Right. And because of that, I was unable to meet with. I met with a lot of them. There were a few of them that just never wanted to see me, but I did make a lot of amends. And I wish I could spend the next hour talking about amends, but I've got about 10 minutes, not even 8 minutes. Something that's really hit me here recently, And what hit me that morning was a third step. I think truly, I know I took a third step in the basement treatments, in the basement storage closet at my treatment center, holding hands with another man reading off of page 63. But there's a line on the top of page 63 that I think we need to spend more time talking about, which it says, when we sincerely take such a position, all sorts of remarkable things will follow. And what happened to me in that apartment on the morning that I got that news was another commitment, a sincere commitment that I was going to do the work out of this big book from then until whenever God takes me out of this body, and we talk about things like, guys, like where I'm at right now, I don't want to do things without God. Every time I do something without God, it like my ego registers it as one more thing I don't need God for. So anything that distances me from self-sufficiency is humility. The closer I'm drifting into God's sufficiency is humility. I can't do anything without God. That puts me in a different position with God. Nick said some beautiful things about me when he introduced me. And I love Nick with all my heart. And to hear those things, my ego loves that shit. It makes me think I'm a big deal. It makes me think I'm significant. This whole process is about increasing God's significance, not Tarek's. But we remind each other of that on a regular basis. In the 12 and 12, at the very beginning, it says the steps are a group of principles, spiritual in nature. And if practice can render the practitioner free of the mental obsession and can make them happily and usefully whole. And we hear that and we think something's missing, right? We alcoholics and drug addicts, we had that feeling of something missing a long time ago. That's why we sought drugs with the desperation of a drowning man or woman. Was that. But this whole journey we're on, it's not about getting anything. It's about losing a bunch of stuff. Losing a bunch of old ideas. One of which is why I brought the 12 and 12 up here. All right? Because the 12 and 12 for me is where it's at right now. The big book is so inspirational. It is a powerful book. But the 12 and 12 is more insightful. The big book lays out these things like getting catapulted into the fourth dimension. And the fact that God has entered in our heart and lives in a way that's indeed miraculous. And we're on the broad highway, right? All these, we were trudging the road of happy destiny, right? It's very certain that defects of character will be cast out. Anybody had that shit happen yet? Defects of character cast out? I can tell you it's going to take at least 17 years and 11 months and 3 weeks. And it hasn't happened yet. So what the 12 and 12 tells you is that you're on a journey. A lot of work has to happen. A lot of self-examination has to happen. I love both books equally. Equally. They blow me away. And it's all about this thing. You know what it introduced me to? Like, the thing about being whole and always thinking something's missing and realizing that this is all addition by subtraction. Addition by subtraction. And then you have this. I was supposed to get up here tonight and share my experience, strength, and hope. I'm sitting here telling you I can't do anything without God. Am I really sharing my strength? I think what I'm meant to do is share my weaknesses, because God emerges through the brokenness. So I don't want to do things without God. Last November, I started going to the gym. Didn't use any prayer and meditation. Didn't work any steps around it. Didn't ask God for the willingness. I went to the gym. I started with a day a week, then it was 2 days a week, then it was 3 days a week, and it lasted until April, and then it vanished. Did it entirely without God. Probably told myself through that period of time, there's a lot of stuff I can do without God. I can handle my girl without God. I can handle this 10-year-old without God. I can handle this 14-year-old without God. Right? I can practice patience and tolerance. try to understand, and just leave God all out of it. I can go there sometimes. And then about 2 weeks ago, well, actually in July, it was June, I started having these tremors in my arm. And I'm going to end with this story and I'll get out of here and I'll sit down. I started having tremors in my arm. So, the mind, Parkinson's, what's going on? It just, my whole arm won't stop shaking. And it lasts for 2 weeks. I had to get a brain MRI. And so my primary care doctor calls me and says that a brain MRI is fine, but we're going to send you to neurology. A couple of weeks later, I get a call from neurology department at UAB. And they tell me that I have been referred to a MS specialist, multiple sclerosis. I'm like, wait a second, how'd this happen? Why am I getting referred to a multiple sclerosis specialist? And they're like, well, we're just calling to schedule the appointment, right? And so I said, okay. And so then I've got the information that my primary care doctor says brain MRI is fine. I'm getting sent to neurology. So I call neurology. I'm like, can I please have someone look at my brain MRI so I don't have to come down there and have a wasted trip and pay a copay and all that stuff? Nobody calls me back. So on October 13th, the day after my belly button birthday, is my appointment. Well, Friday before my birthday, on October 10th, I get a phone call. Right? I get a phone call. And it's from a nurse practitioner at UAB. And they told me they really needed me to come on Monday because I've got white lesions on my brain. And they need to do some tests and they need to find out what it is. It could be MS. It could be something else. So that was the weekend, right? But see, God blesses us with gifts. And sometimes the gifts don't look like gifts and blessings. Because on September 18th, our dear friend who I'm going over, just so you know, a few minutes. I started the talk with Scott. And Scott was passing away. And Brandon kept encouraging me to call him, and I scheduled a video call with him. I will forever be so grateful that he encouraged me to do that, and I took the actions because I got to sit with one of my heroes and watch how a human being confronts death with dignity and grace. He was scared. He was sad, but he was grounded. One of the greatest gifts I've ever received is just being able to have that phone call with that man. And it changed my experience from Friday to Monday. It changed my experience from Friday to Monday. So I took all the tests, no Parkinson's, no Alzheimer's, but I have too many white lesions on my brain for a 49-year-old. So I'm at high risk for a stroke and an aneurysm. They said, you have to quit vaping immediately, right? Back in February, there's a guy we sponsor over Zoom, and he had quit vaping, and he did it with a book. And I know something about using a book to do things in life. So he did it with a book. And I said, what's the book? And he showed me the book, so I bought it, and it went on my stack in queue, right? So it was this Sunday or Monday, I knew they were going to tell me I had to quit vaping. So I said a prayer. The first thing that shows up for me is that book. Like my vision gets drawn to the book, right? I start reading the book. And it's telling you not to stop smoking or vaping while you're reading the book. But you'll be moved into stop. It's Alan Carr's easy way to quit smoking, quit vaping. And I'm praying the whole time. And I'm asking God to guide me into this experience. And then last Thursday, I'm driving home from being out of town and my left arm goes numb in the car. This was 2 Thursdays. This Thursday will be 2 weeks ago. A sign that you're having a stroke is your left arm going numb. And in the car, I hear this voice, stop vaping. I haven't vaped since, right? I don't know if it's going to stay. I pray it does, and I hope it does, and I hope that's my path in front of me. But what I'm here to share with you is I did it with God. I want to do everything with God because we don't know what true humility is. It's the fact that I am insignificant, that I can't do anything without God, and that I have a debt to pay God. I know there's not going to be a day that goes by that I don't have my spiritual bread. I'm going to have everything I need to confront everything in life. And every single one of us is going to be found by an entity. Everyone in this room is going to have a confrontation with death. And I leave you with a question tonight. What if our entire lives are supposed to be preparation for that moment. Would that change the way you live your life if you could remember that? What if we're preparing for that moment? Mark used to say that there was a tombstone. It was really Don P. used to say the tombstone. October 12th, 1976, dash. November 5th, 2007, dash. I'm in my second dash. So what I ask you, what are you doing with your dash? The second one. The greatest gift that God has ever given me is my recovery. And what I do with my recovery is my gift back to God. And I hope God's as pleased with my gift to him as I am with his gift to me. My name is Tarek. I'm a member of Drug Addicts Anonymous.